So I'd like to introduce Robert Steeg, attorney, Steeg Law. He's probably, there's not many real estate attorneys you can go to in this town with complicated issues. There's definitely a lot of people that say they can handle it, but Steeg is one that they do handle it. They handle very complex leases. They deal with lots of developers, lots of condo deals, lots of commercial. And when you want to know what's going on in town with deals, you talk to Mr. Steeg. So, Mr. Steeg, you there?
I'm here.
Fantastic. So, what are you seeing right now? Basically, we had condo deals happening. We had different projects going. Or what are you hearing? Are things just dead, or are they continuing?
No, that's good. Jeff, did you just read that right off our website? Because that copy sounded good. I'm glad. If you read it off the website, got it off the website, our PR guy's doing a good job. Actually, Jeffrey had sent me a couple of things to talk about. So what I'm seeing is everybody scrambling, especially in the leasing area, and a domino effect of businesses closing and then landlords wondering how they're going to meet their notes, and then they're running to their banks and the tenants are running to the landlords. And we're seeing, and let me mention one thing, Jeffrey, we don't just do the complicated stuff. We have a small division. What we do is we do some residential work, but it's not volume, it's quality. It's kind of when you have the kid gloves property that somebody needs personal treatment on.
And do you mean for closings, or do you mean for?
Yeah, I mean for closings. Okay. Yeah, we have a residential division, do a lot of condo closings and a lot of upper end home closings.
Because y'all kind of write the condo docs a lot of times, and you're part of the development, so you're right in the middle there. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, we got you muted somehow.
Got it now?
Got it.
Okay. I'm also seeing a lot of condo issues. People are threatening to sue their condo associations over mishandling the virus. A lot of, it's not as much in purchases and sales, but there's a lot of activity inside the condos that's going on. So basically, in terms of leases, all the big retail tenants are demanding huge deals. I mean, they just send out a form letter that says, I'm not paying rent for 3 months, and then I want 3 months at half rent to let me ramp back up, and I'll be paying you rent in November, the full rent back in November or something. So retail is really hurting. The property owners are really hurting. Office is staying pretty good. Maybe 90 to 95% of the tenants are paying full rate, and office is doing fine. And residential is mixed. We have a lot of multifamily residential clients, and on the one hand, it's a stay-at-home order, so they're getting their apartment. On the other hand, they don't have a job, and so they can't pay their rent. And on the third hand, the landlord still has his mortgage to pay. So the landlords are pretty much just kind of cutting smaller deals depending on the extent of the story. I have one client that has sent out a letter that says you have to have been laid off or furloughed, and you have to have filed for unemployment because I need to see that you're really trying to help yourself before I'm going to help you. That's just one client's approach to it. But it's pretty, they have a lot of apartments, and that's kind of what they're doing. In terms of evictions, all of you all need to know that there are two things. First, the courts are all closed until May the 4th. And on Friday, since the governor extended his stay-at-home order till May the 15th, everybody expects that the court closure order will be through May 15th. And so, although you can, rent is still owed, and you can still write a letter to a tenant saying, your rent is still owed, you can't threaten eviction and you can't pursue eviction until these rules are lifted. So a lot of tenants are just not paying, but the landlords are trying to let them know, you know, there's going to be a reckoning. There are some tenants in a great position. I have a client with a bunch of tenants on a month-to-month lease. They're not paying. He can't take any action against them. And when the stay is lifted, you know, they can terminate their lease. But evictions are stayed, and there's an additional rule that any property that has a federally backed mortgage. So if there are any properties that have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgages, or any other federal agency backing the mortgage, including an SBA loan, they can't take any action toward eviction until July 25th. So that's an additional wrinkle that you ought to keep in mind. Jeffrey asked me to talk a little bit about the lease modification process.
Yeah, and real quick, I forgot to mention at the beginning, you've got agents that own multi-family dwellings on here. I think I actually saw a friend who owns tons of doubles around town on the call. We've got a number of agents that also own, you know, they bought a double as investment. Airbnb became the highest and best use to that second side, and they're stuck holding a bag. So you've got, and then there's those of us who manage property. I mean, I manage a nice size multi-tenant apartment. I don't know if you know, I need to be telling my landlord, hey, you need to be putting like a Purell, you know, stand-up station when you walk in so you can say you did something. I mean, what's the new standard of care that we should be sharing with our landlords in a multi-tenant situation or condo building?
Yeah. So I'm seeing some chats down there, and it's July 25th was the date, and that's on projects that have federally backed financing. Evictions are stayed until July 25th, and yes, that's nationwide. That's from the CARES Act, the same act that created the payroll protection loan and the extended unemployment benefits nationwide. So Jeffrey, that's an additional area of concern, which is, like I said, condo associations are getting complaints. People are threatening to sue, and the same with apartments. The Jefferson Parish, for example, my doorbell's about to ring, so and then the dog's going to bark. So
nope, we're used to that. It sounds like we're slaughtering children upstairs right now. So I'm sure everyone knows that too.
So nobody really knows what the standard of care is, but definitely Purell stations and wipe downs are going to be, you know, you need to have a program for that and keep track of it. I was on a call yesterday where a couple of people from Jefferson Parish were previewing what their back to work plan was going to be. And it was going to mandate, if anybody has retail, it was going to mandate a plexiglass shield between the cashier and the customer, for example. And in terms, and it was going to describe the standards. So again, in retail, they were going to make the retail store put strips of tape on the ground in front of the cashier, 6 feet apart strips, so the customers would wait in line and have a demarcation on the floor telling them where to stand. And then they were going to mandate periodic wipe downs, which is where I was going with that. Yes, if your guys have Airbnbs or apartments, doubles, fourplexes or larger, wipe down of public areas and spacing in public areas, policing no get-togethers. You know, if you have an apartment with a pool, it's going to be the apartment manager's responsibility to make sure people aren't hanging out there closer than 6 feet, because then if somebody gets sick, they're going to say, you know, you didn't have any signs up. Signs is mandatory in lobbies. I say mandatory, it's very well advised in lobbies and gathering areas.
So I'm thinking of a lot of uptown, because we're, a big percentage of our business is uptown. I'm thinking these places that I used to live when I went to Loyola, or friends lived when I went to Loyola, and you go in one entrance and there's a few floors and 6 to 10 doors up, a few floors, and everyone's kind of got common mail areas. So, and those areas never got cleaned. They got cleaned when there was maybe like a terrible weather storm and the door blew in. So you're telling me that we should be, there needs to at least be a plan to have a company or someone go and periodically
wipe down the front door,
wipe down and put notices, that sort of thing.
And put notices that say, when entering the mailroom, if somebody else is here, wait here and wait for them to get their mail and leave.
Yeah.
Now, basically the more the better, because later, if somebody gets sick, then they're going to point to, somebody's going to come through and in retrospect, be able to find all the things that you didn't do and blow them up. And maybe that's what maybe that didn't cause anything, but they'll be able to make hay out of it. So the more you put signage up and for social distancing, and you wipe surfaces and police the main areas, the pool and the lobby, the better. It's one of those things where there isn't a standard. It's like negligence. Nobody knows what negligence is until a judge is about to decide it. So nobody's going to know what the standard is until it's in court and you missed one thing and they're blowing that thing out of proportion. But if you did 10 other things, and those were, there's CDC guidelines. When Orleans has a reopen plan, there will be guidelines. Now the apartments are still open, but you can steal things from the commercial reopening plans in terms of what are they telling a mall to do? Well, you can adapt that to your apartment complex or your small apartment. So the more the better. There is going to be some responsibility on the apartment owner to provide some Purell and to have some rules up so that if you go into any office building or any store now, you see the signs, telling people what to do.
And I'm not an attorney, but my understanding has always been, if you make some sort of plan that adopts best practices, and it doesn't need to be overly specific, but it just needs to say once a week we will make best effort to clean common area surfaces. We will place signs and also evaluate on a monthly basis if those signs are still there.
Right.
Even if you miss a week, at least you have something to say, show a judge, show in discovery, hey, we had a plan. Yes, the vendor didn't show up that day, but all these other things were there.
Right. You're trying to meet a standard of reasonableness in light of the practices in the community, and so you don't have to have Janet King come in every day and sanitize the whole place, but you want to take a few steps and show that you were proactive and
you're
you had
doing
a
something, not nothing.
Right.
So if I own a double,
somebody asked
and you've got a shared porch, do I have to put a sign up on a shared porch that says if your neighbor's out, please stay in, or less than 10 people on this porch at a time?
Well, basically, a single family home, basically, you would be well advised to make up a one-time flyer and put it in their mailbox or under their door that says, if it's a double, that says, respect your neighbor, keep 6 feet, on the porch, and please, take care to wipe down your surfaces. Overall, I would say singles and doubles, no. People rent a single family home, they're responsible for it. People rent a double, they read the news too, and they can say, they walk out on the porch and the guy on the other side is too close, they can say, look, social distancing. So basically, the owner of a single or double is probably safe doing nothing, but if they want to be extra safe, they just make up one flyer, pass it under the door that says, please respect your neighbor. Remember the backyard is too small to have, don't have parties, no 10 people. If you have people over, keep social distancing and please respect the person living next door. But that's kind of a one-shot thing. I don't think the owner of a double or a single family home has any responsibility to wipe anything down or do anything along those lines. No
Okay.
Purell, for example.
Could we do that notice by an email?
Yeah, as long as ask them to acknowledge receipt.
So we
Yes,
have proof.
absolutely.
So we have proof that we did suggest that to them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about, if it's okay to move on, lease modifications. I think from a commercial and a residential side, I'm thinking of a property I manage. There's a bar. They've been shut down, and they're just incommunicado. I mean, absolutely not telling me a word. And then you've got people just paying their residential leases that are just looking for help. What are you seeing? What is the kind of a best practice? How do we approach that?
So here's what I'm seeing. So first of all, whatever deal you make, you do want to paper it carefully. And when you write it up, you need to coordinate it with the rest of the lease. You need to make sure it uses the same terminology. If it's a commercial lease, you don't want to say, I'm going to give you a break in rent if the term is base rent. I'm not trying to get technical on you, but in the end, if you don't coordinate the modification with the existing document, you can end up with some problems. Business-wise, though, is really what you're getting at. What I'm seeing is granting. I'm seeing a lot of relief being granted for April. Think about what the tools are in the toolbox. The tools are rent abatement, 100%, rent relief or waiver. That could be 100%, it could be 50%. And rent deferral. Most landlords are trying to do some kind of deferral as opposed to a complete relief. Now, that then leads to extension of time on the other end. A lot of landlords are saying, I'll give you some rent relief, but I want you to, I'm going to give you relief for 2 months, but I want you to extend your lease for 2 months so I can pick up the rent on the other end. And a lot of times, and the extension is needed also in order to give the tenant time to pay back the deferral. So let's say you give a 50% waiver for April and a 50% deferral, and you do the same thing for May, or you change the percentages. You still have a deferred amount, and then you need to say when that's gonna be paid back. When's that gonna start? The longer the lease, the easier it is, because if you give deferral for April and May, it's pretty unlikely that the guy's going to have his job back by June and be able to pay June's rent plus some part of the deferral. So you usually, what I'm seeing is relief for April and May, getting back to normal for June and July, and starting some kind of payback of the deferred amount in August or September, and then continuing a period of months. And as I mentioned before, a lot of landlords are requiring to see some evidence that people have applied for the unemployment, especially the extra $600, and have applied for their stimulus checks. It might be considered cold-hearted, but what I've heard several residential landlords say, I mentioned it earlier, is, I got to see that you're at least trying to help yourself and not just, sitting back. A lot of people, though, are unsophisticated and unable even to figure out the computer system to apply for it. So, sometimes you have to do a little hand holding. On the commercial side, it's kind of the same structure, except the deferral is oftentimes there's no waiver, it's more of a deferral, and the lease extensions are longer, and they're asking the commercial tenants to commit on the back end so they can pay back the relief they're getting on the front end. And the commercial tenants are asking for a longer period of time to ramp up. So they're asking at least for relief into June because they don't see their businesses coming back for a while.
Okay, so by the way, we're getting towards the end of my questions. If you all have questions for Mr. Steeg, just post them in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them. I guess we've gone through a lot here. What do you think we need to be most mindful of right now? Our people are talking to lots of potential clients, lots of friends, all who have real estate interests that are vary from just wanting to buy something to own a lot. What message do you think we should be conveying?
Well, I guess there are a couple of things. I think residential real estate is going to maintain its value because I think we're seeing social shifts where people are seeing that they can work from home, and a lot of businesses are going to encourage working from home. And so I think residential is going to remain strong. For your clients with short-term rentals, I've been hearing a little of concerns about short-term rentals in terms of cleanliness. In other words, that there's kind of maybe a little swing back to hotels who can put a lot of resources behind cleaning. Are you really gonna go rent that short-term rental for a weekend on Labor Day when you don't know who was in it the weekend before? So short-term rentals, I think you might have a little, might be a little harder sell these days, and might be a little riskier investment for your clients. Let me mention a little bit about the closing process, because we've had to make a lot of adjustments. So closings are still going on, but they're going to be, they take a little longer, and they're going to be, if you can, build a little extra time into your purchase agreements. It takes the title abstractors a little longer. They have to work off of computer. It takes longer for the documents to get shared sometimes. And then the closing process itself is, we're still having closings. I don't know if you all have heard about the rules about remote notarization.
Not yet, no. Tell us.
Now, it's not going to help. So we're going to have, actually, at our website, I will throw one plug in there. On our website, we're about to have a roundtable of real estate issues, not in depth, but just what's going on in different fields as a result of the virus. And we're going to cover leases, closings, title, condo, lawsuits. So I don't know if that's up yet, but most of it is up. So
if you email me, I'll send out a blast to the entire office so that they can go see it and get access.
Okay, great. So the closing process is just a little slower. There are three things that are going on. First, they've authorized the notary on some documents doesn't have to physically be present in the room with the person signing. But that does not cover the most important documents, the sale and the mortgage, or a donation. So still, but it does cover minor documents like an affidavit, for example, or an ancillary document, or things like that. The notary, like I just notarized somebody's real estate application. They came to my front door. They stood on the sidewalk and signed on the hood of their car. I stood at my front door, and I videoed their signature. then I have to keep that for 5 years to have the remote notarization work. Like I could hit record on this and somebody could sign as long as I see them, and then I got to keep that for 5 years. But still, other than that, you're still going to end up going to the closing office. The other way to get around it is you can do a power of attorney. They can do a power of attorney to just one person. If all the papers are done, they can do the power of attorney to you. Now, what that means is, yes, that still has to be notarized in person.
We don't allow power of attorneys to our agents. Just
to your
so you
agent.
know. It's
Okay.
been a nasty. I think there's been a few court cases, and
no, I think that's a very good idea. A lot of times they do it to the closing agent, although some closing agents have a similar policy. But at least they could just do it to one person, and that way they don't have to trudge a whole lot of people down to the notary's office. And what we've been doing is staggering it, and so we'll have the buyer come in at 10, and the conference room is set up, and the chairs are way far apart, and then they leave, and then the seller comes in at 11, and so and then similarly with the lender, although the lenders often don't show up anyway. Their documents are done, and they're just counting on the closing agent. So there's still closings, but they're more cumbersome and they take longer, and the whole process takes a little longer. I'm sure y'all are running into the same issues on inspections, and you're doing your own processes of going in one person at a time and wiping things down and whatever. It's been
a mixed bag. We've been having lots of conversations with clients, and some want full PPE, shoe covers, face masks, and gloves, and other agents are holding open houses because the clients don't care.
Really?
And there's no food maybe anymore, but it's really, really a mixed bag from client to client, we're finding.
Okay. So the advice on the closing process is it is still going on, but it's a little slower. So, if you can build in a little extra time.
So 45 days kind of minimum from contract to close?
Yeah, I would say that, right.
Okay, and then we've also been advising upping the time for curative title work to 45 days. In the past, that's been a 15 to 30 day kind of advised period. We're saying minimum of 45 now. Is that pretty accurate for you guys?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's the number that I would have, that we've used, and what I would have in mind.
Great. All right, well, does anyone have any other questions? I saw one about tenants trying to get out of one because of rodents. How do they do that? You want to opine there?
Sure.
Probably tough without seeing a lease.
Yeah.
On the residential
so from the tenant's point of view, there are two theories that tenants are using to get out of leases. One is I'm sure you've heard the phrase force majeure argued or bandied around a lot. Basically, an act of God, something that renders what they're doing impossible or really, really difficult. For residential, that doesn't really apply, but that could apply to some of your commercial tenant clients. The other is there is a not very well-known doctrine that talks about if the tenant's use of the property is substantially impaired. I'm thinking of the virus. This wouldn't apply to rodents yet. That a tenant can get out of his lease. Now, for rodents, and that's your kind of run-of-the-mill tenant problem, you have to give the landlord a chance to fix it. But if there's a problem that makes the premises uninhabitable, then the standard lease wording lets the tenant get out of their lease for uninhabitability. So it has to be really bad. But if they send, let's say, 2 letters, a letter and give the landlord a chance to fix it, another letter and give the landlord a chance to fix it, then and if it's really getting to the point where it's not safe or to inhabit the property, then they should be able to pick up and leave.
So in the case of water falling down the ceiling, you call them, a day later it's still falling down, you've got a great case for getting out, I'm guessing. But in the case of rodents or lesser, you've got maybe days, weeks, that sort of thing, and that notice period becomes, or time that the landlord has to repair is a little bit longer. Is that fair?
Yeah, but although you know, to call a pest control company, it doesn't take very long. So, and it depends on the circumstances. If you have a young baby, if it's an older person, then that person probably has better reason to leave quickly. And it depends on the extent of the problem. If it's, you know, I think back to, I won't go into that, but I had a lot of roaches in apartments when I was younger. But, you know, if you have rats, well, I used to take an ankle weight that I used when I jogged, and just as the roach crawled across the kitchen table, used the ankle weight. And believe it or not, the woman I was dating then married me. But if it's rats, then you shouldn't have to tolerate that for very long. You know, if it's mice, they carry disease. You make a call. All the landlord has to do is call a pest control company and get them to put some traps out. So it's kind of two letters. Give them 2 days after each letter, and then you're probably on solid ground.
Great. Well, I don't see any other chat questions coming in. I really, really appreciate your time. I know we went longer than I told you we would, but
No, my
this was
pleasure.
really, really valuable. So thank you so much.
Good. Anytime. And
Thank
Jeffrey,
you,
any of your guys, any of you all listening, you know, feel free. You know, we're a small shop. We have 7 lawyers, and it's all we do. We don't do other things. We don't do car accidents. We don't do labor law. So we're happy to answer questions. You know, I'll send Jeffrey my contact information, and you know, it's perfectly fine to shoot me an email and ask a question. You know, we're happy to help.
Great. And you know, a lot of us deal from time to time selling a building, maybe in the French Quarter, Magazine Street, that's got commercial on the bottom and residences on top. And we get in that residential world. Some of us do it more than not. And some of us actually lease those areas. And I urge you, trying to write a commercial lease yourself is not like a residential lease. This is the guy, you know,
Yeah, it really
this is your allied resource right here. He's going to keep you out of a lot. He's going to keep you out of a lot of trouble. And Claire's saying she loves Ryan over there.
Oh, good. Thanks.
At your office.
So yeah, I just saw that. And the one thing that I will say is we do have a reputation of doing the complex things, but sometimes that's at the expense of people thinking of us for the simple things. And, you know, we have a range of people who can handle, and we do a lot of simple, straightforward things, you know, leases on Magazine Street, you know, residential leases for people with 8 plexes. So it's not just for the super sophisticated, complicated stuff. Routine stuff is very economical to do on our end. You know, we can take care of it quickly, and so don't just wait to call on the super complicated stuff.
You got it. Well, thank you so much.
Good.
And we really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Wait, one quick question.
Okay, go ahead, Gretchen.
I can't figure out how to do the messaging. Do you have an example of the lease modification? Does he have?
Yeah, I do. I have some complicated ones, but if you want
for residential, not commercial.
I am going to be writing one in the next few days, and I'll send you I'll send Jeffrey a template for it.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. That'd be fantastic. Thank you so
Wow,
much.
thank you.
Okay.
All right,
I'll
that's
sign
very
off.
kind.
Bye, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Appreciate it, Mr.
Okay.
Steeg. All right.